Hey, welcome to Leaf and Dram. This is the Frankie Drinks podcast here. I'm at the lovely Finca table and bar in lovely West Dade, Miami-Dade County, right by my hood. Just a great place, and I'm gonna give you full introduction to those guys a little bit later, possibly on another podcast. But today I'm sitting in their back room, chilling out, enjoying being out of the heat, and just having a good time with y'all. So this is Leaf and Dram. Welcome back. One of the things that I wanted to talk about this time was going into part 2 of rum. So thank you for tuning in the previous week, just to go ahead and talk about the history of sugar, the history of rum, and getting all your guys great feedback. And it was such a great show. So much thanks to my guest, Joe P, and hanging out at La Trova, talking about like really the birth of rum. And it's kind of been always right on the cusp, you know, even in modern day, about like what are people drinking. And they've been drinking scotch, and then they go into the American whiskeys, and that goes through its boom. Now the agave spirits are going through its boom, and people are asking the question, when is it rum's turn? And the reality is that rum has been here from the very beginning, still here, still dominating. Doesn't end up being like the #1 spirit in consumption, but it's always inside that top 3 or 4. And globally, the Indian market really makes a huge impact on the consumption of it. In fact, you would be shocked to find out who the #1 brand is. So if you put in your guess for who do you think the #1 brand in rum is globally, we'll figure out how to reward you, and I'll give you the answer at the end of today's podcast. So welcome to Leaf and Dram, rum part 2 that I'm going to call it. So what I promised to tell you about was the classifications of rum. So rum, you know, in its most basic form has been classified, I guess, by the general public as light rum, gold rum, and dark rum. And that is such a bizarre way of going about it, because there's so many factors that go into it, that light or white rum and gold rum and dark rum are really terrible descriptors of the categories of rum. So I'm going to try to bridge that with getting a little more on the geeky side of what rum is and how it's classified and how the new classifications of rum are coming in. But you know, where do we start? Well, let's start with you know, the basic styles. So what you're going to have is the basic styles are English rum, Spanish rum, French rum, and which is rum, R-U-M, ron, R-O-N for Spanish, and R-H-U-M for French style rum. And then we'll break off into a couple little nuanced categories with that. But let's kind of like break it down for you. So for you guys to understand, what is English rum? Well, we can categorize English rum pretty much as it's a molasses-based rum. So we'll start there. It's molasses-based. Remember, we talked about like how we make rum. It's the byproduct. It's the industrial waste of actual sugar production. So we start with molasses. Then we move into the type of still that they use. So the English style rum comes out of a pot still. So in that pot still distillation, you're going to get a lot more flavor components coming through. They're deeper, they're darker, they're richer, and they're actually a little bit more potent. So, you know, you'll hear things like English Navy style rum or overproof rum, and those are kind of the signifiers of English style. But just to give you an idea of what are the countries that produce English style rum, and, you know, I have to look at a list because it's huge. But we'll start with Antigua, Bahamas, Barbados, Bermuda, Guyana, Jamaica, Mauritius, which is not in the Caribbean, St. Lucia, Trinidad, Tobago, and the Virgin Islands, or the British Virgin Islands, just to kind of deviate a little bit there. But, you know, what are the brands? Well, when we're talking about Antigua, you know, maybe some of the brands you recognize: English Harbor. Bahamas, you know, John Watling's. Barbados, definitely Mount Gay. Any of the Seal family rums, Real McCoy, Four Square, and quick story about Richard Seal. He's one of the main proponents about pushing through a denomination of origin for rum, because we'll get into this later. Descriptors and age statements are something that's kind of like the Wild West in the world of rum. And they want to actually move something closer to how Scotch or how American whiskey is labeled according to the process and its age. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Bermuda makes Goslings. You guys know Goslings real well. Guyana, El Dorado, great Demerara based rum. I love it. Jamaica, you guys know Appleton is like #1, Hampton State, Ray and Nephew. And with that, you know, listen, I can't do a show without doing a little pour. So I've got the Appleton Estate Signature Blend here, and I'm going to be sipping it because what else do we do? So I'm going to raise a glass to everybody out there. I hope you raised your glass before we got started. But for you guys, cheers to you. Thanks for tuning in. The nose on that is fantastic. I love it on a rock. You can have the later expressions kind of neat. You can have it any way you really want. Rum is meant for mixing. Rum is meant for sipping. Rum is meant for on the rocks. However way you want to enjoy it. I'll continue. St. Lucia Chairman's Reserve, Trinidad and Tobago Pussers, Angostura Caroni, and Virgin Islands Cruzan, and the world famous Captain Morgan. So these are the British style rums, and they're all truly phenomenal. There's a couple in there I haven't put in, but you know, my favorite in tiki cocktails is something called Smith and Cross overproof rum, coming out of House Alpens. They actually take the distillate, they take it to Scotland for some processing and bottling, and man, full of hogo. So when you hear the term hogo, very rarely will you come across it unless you start going like real deep. And hogo is actually all the aromas you get from a rum when you take a breath, and part of it is or take a deep analysis of what you're smelling. And sometimes in Jamaican rums and some of the deeper ones, you're gonna get this hogo is funk. You get like this funky stuff that could be a sweaty sock, it could be cheesy, it could be a whole mess of things, but that funk on the aroma, that's the hogo. That's it's indicator of usually that the taste is going to be a little bit more intense, but really, really wonderful. So cheers again. Now we'll jump into Spanish rums. The Spanish rums most recently have done really, really well in the market. They're made from molasses as well. They could also be from light molasses to darker molasses, but usually it's darker molasses. Their modern production is more column still, so it leads to a kind of lighter profile rum that just because of the continuous still distillation lends you to more floral notes, than the deeper, darker, funky notes that you find in English rums. And more importantly, but prior to, they did things in pot stills as well. And then you're going to find new producers doing a combination of column stills and pot stills. So I think that that's great. We'll talk about that in a second. But what are the countries? So pretty much we can go through all the Spanish-speaking countries in the Caribbean, Central America, South America. So Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Mexico, Panama, Peru, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, and then we can say maybe the Philippines. And I'll tell you why maybe the Philippines. Because it truly is, they make their rum in the Spanish style. They were a Spanish colony for many, many years until the Spanish-American War. But they're kind of outliers, right? Just like Mauritius is way outlier outside of Africa. We're talking about the Philippines way in the Pacific, making Spanish style rum. But we can put it there as a placeholder for now. And you know, what are the famous Spanish style blends? I mean, out of Colombia, it's Ron Viejo de Caldas, Parce Dictador, Costa Rica, Ron Centenario, Cuba, biggest one there is, man, Bacardi, and then Havana Club. And then if you follow rum lore, you can see the Havana Club now is made in Puerto Rico, and they're having a intellectual property thing because Pernod Ricard owns Havana Club, the Cuban version of Havana Club that's available everywhere in the world except for the US, where the Puerto Rican version is. And there's a great story with the entirety of Havana Club, and hopefully I'll get a good friend on here to tell us that story, because that is really a fascinating one. Dominican Republic, you got Brugal, Ecuador, San Miguel. Guatemala, you guys know two of the big ones, Botran and Zacapa. So if you don't know Zacapa, I don't know what you've been drinking, but you need to get your game on, because Zacapa is a wonderful example of a Solera style, and I'll explain what a Solera style is in a minute. Nicaragua, big up. For the home of Drew Estate Cigars and many, many cigar companies coming out of Esteli and the rest of the country, but right outside, you know, about maybe 2 hours from the capital, you have the home of Flor de Caña in Nicaragua. So most famous of rums going back to like 1890. So one of the oldest as well. Mexico, Paranubes, and they make their own style, and Paranubes is not molasses based, it's more of non-molasses based, but we'll talk about that. Ron Abuelo from Panama, Cartavia from Peru, Don Q from Puerto Rico, and then Venezuela. One of my favorite rums comes from there. That's Santa Teresa and Diplomático. And you're going, Santa Teresa has a history going back to 1796. So one of like the oldest, even in comparison. Even Appleton has history going back to 1749. Though out of the oldest rums in the New World, I think continuously in production has been Mount Gay, dating back to 1703. So Mount Gay takes the title for the oldest, at least in the islands. And then we would say that Santa Teresa takes it for the oldest in South America, Central America. And then Tanduay, pretty close, 1854, out in the Philippines. So we covered English, we covered Spanish. What's left? Well, we got to cover French style. What's French style? You can hear a term called rhum agricole. And rhum agricole is different in that it's actually made not from molasses, it's made from fresh sugarcane juice. So they let the juice ferment, and from that fermentation, they go ahead and they distill it instead of it being from the rum, from the molasses fermentation. And the style of rum they get tends to be a little bit on the drier side, very, very grassy, as a sugarcane or rum agricole can be. and they can be a combination of column still and or pot still. And the countries producing them: French Guiana, Guadeloupe, Haiti, Martinique, Mauritius, and like I said, there's some outliers. And now we get into Brazil, and you've heard of something called cachaça, and cachaça is a sugarcane based juice fermentation distilled into a spirit. So falls more into the French style. It's actually its own category, its own, but I tucked it in to make it easy. And what are some of the brands you recognize? Well, from Martinique, you might recognize Rum Clement, St. James. From Haiti, Rum Barbancourt, one of my favorites, and they have a really unique way of, they just call once they make their rum, they don't have light, gold, dark. They just like, it's new, it's old, or it's really old. So those are the three main styles. So English, Spanish, French. That's what kind of keeps the old process moving in understanding how rum gets classified. So let's talk a little bit about the process for you guys that want to really know how we get there. So first, you got to start with its base material. So you're either working with molasses, which is about 97% of all rum that's made is molasses based, and then the other ones are sugarcane juice based. Again, rum agricole, as I said before, or cachaças. And as when we were talking with my buddy Joe, he showed us some great stuff from Madeira and from the Azores, which is just great. Probably sugar cane juice fermented rums really defy the category. So when you do that, remember back in the day, you would actually leave something that was organic. The natural yeasts in the air would start to eat up the starches that were inside, right? Oh, they're trying to break down the sugar. So yeast breaks down sugar, it consumes it, it basically gives off two distinct byproducts. One is carbonation, and the other one is alcohol. So when you take that fermentation, and basically after a certain amount of alcohol production by the yeast itself, when it finishes pretty much eating all the starches that are available, it will actually, the alcohol content kills the yeast. So it actually stops at a certain level. When you look at what the level of that is probably about 4% alcohol at that time. So that's a fermented beverage. But then you take that into the distillation process, and you make that a low wine. You distill again, you make it a high wine. Now you get it up to the proof that you want it. But that's, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So fermentation, sometimes for light-bodied rums, it could take a day, a couple of days. Sometimes for full-bodied distillation, could be 2 to 5 days. Remember, we're talking about the tropics here, so generally speaking, these things happen rather quickly. Some of the high ester rums and esters are like the British style that have a lot of aroma. Those can take between 5 and 15 days because they really let the yeast get in there and start to break down these things. And again, depending on how far you take it is how the end product ends up being. So we move to distillation. Pot still, remember I kind of described pot still as like you get like you boil something here and then you capture it here, and then there's remember alcohol boils off at a lower temperature, so the water stays here, the alcohol vapors come here, they get captured, and then they get in the alembic, and then they get distilled down and recaptured when you cool the capturing tools. Takes it from a vapor back to a liquid, and you take that, and then you actually don't take all that liquid. the first piece is not good for you, and the last piece is not good for you. So it's called heads, hearts, and tails. So you take heads and tails, and you can throw it back in and run that through your distillation process one more time. You take the hearts of it, and then you really distill that to get your final product. So column stills work a different way. It's like a long tube, and then the fermented mash gets dropped into the tubes. There's a heating source that comes up from the bottom. As the liquid comes down, the alcohol comes back up and gets captured the same way. So those two styles really render slightly different results. And pot still, it's gonna have a lot of congeners, again, a lot of the flavor components, but it has impurities, and it has a real depth of flavor, and that's part of the process of a pot still. And columns actually produce something that's very, very clean, and very efficient. So that's a big part of it. Then you get your distillate, and now you throw it into a barrel, typically oak. Mostly now, all use bourbon barrels. Sometimes in the tropics, about a year's worth of aging is about 3 to 4 years in more temperate climates. So a year here in the tropics, and south of me is worth 4 years in Kentucky. And the guys in Kentucky will tell you that those 4 years, like 1 year in Kentucky equals like 4 years in Scotland. So there's a whole thing about Kentucky. You're counting on that barrel going through seasonal changes and extracting the rum and the whiskey. Typically it goes into the barrel, comes out of the barrel, goes into the barrel on the seasonal and temperature changes. In the tropics, you really pretty much don't have too many temperature changes, but what you're doing is you're concentrating its flavor, you're having interaction with the char and with the wood, and it gives you a slightly different end product. So usually the barrels are recharged or recharred, and then a lot of rum brands are doing a second barrel finishing just to go ahead and make sure that you're getting a different profile. So they're adding sherry barrels, and they're adding wine barrels, and all these great finishing aging things that you could do to make your products a little special. So man, that's good. Anyway, so lastly is the Solera method. So imagine a pyramid of barrels. So imagine you have this huge pyramid, and then what you do is you're dropping new whiskey into the top, or new rum into the top barrel, and then that top barrel it gets connected to the next levels. And the next levels have your older rums and older rums and older rums. So as you draw out from the bottom, which has been this natural blending process, you're pulling out some old rum, some middle-aged rum, and some new rum. But it's all being blended kind of in a vertical fashion, and it's a constant process. So one of the most famous ones that does it is Zacapa, and we can dive into that when my friend Rebecca comes on soon. But it's real fascinating the way that they do it. It kind of takes a little bit of that process from Spain and Portugal and how they do things. Blending is so key and crucial when it comes down to the final product. So you're trying to find consistency, balance, and complexity when you're talking about the blending process, and that to me is incredibly so important as you're taking rums that are potentially different ages together, as a signature blend is. It's actually a blend of different age rums, from something newer to something a little bit older, and that blending process to get a certain flavor profile very underrated in the final process. But the master blender, shout out to the one that I know in the cigar world, my man Willie Herrera. The term master blender is truly that person that puts the final distinctive touch on what that product is going to be for the consumer. And so finally you get to, you go to the store, you know what an English rum is, you know what a Spanish rum is, and then you know what a French rum is. So English rums, just to let you know, if it has a number on it, it's the youngest rum inside the bottle. If it's so if you see something like a Appleton 8, that's 8-year-old that's in the bottle, minimum. So the youngest stuff in that bottle is 8 years old. Follows very similar to Scotch whiskey laws. Spanish, it could be an average of the ages. So if it says 12 years, it could have 6-year in there, it could have 18-year, and there really are no rules. So if you see something with a number and it's a Spanish style rum, buyer beware. Age doesn't necessarily mean value. It's an average age of the products that are in there. So make sure that you like what they're putting together. So French, again, French agricole style usually does not have an age statement. It'll either tell you if it's just regular agricole or Vaux, meaning old, or ultra Vaux, or whatever their terminology is for something extra old or not, and it really doesn't get into that. But again, the industry is changing. Take a drink with me as we're wrapping up a lot of information I dropped for you guys, and one of the couple like little tidbits. So for me, in 1997, cheers to Joy Spence from the Appleton Distillery, and I'm blessed to have a lot of great friends at Campari Group and with Appleton. And Joy Spence in 1997 becomes the first female master blender in recorded spirits history. So again, recorded, but her palate. Very important in the crafting of Appleton rums, and they're one of my favorites. Lorena Garcia, another favorite, becomes the master blender at Zacapa, and these ladies have great stories. Look them up on YouTube. That's Joy Spence and Lorena Garcia Zacapa, so you can take a look at their stories, and they're just fascinating. Right now, rum is the third largest, so behind vodka and whiskey. Agave spirits are coming up super strong. It may be the fourth category, so we'll see. So anyway, listen, I did promise that I'd reward somebody with something. So let's go through the top brands globally. And as I rock this Appleton signature. So number 5, so I'm gonna go backwards here, top 5 in the world. Number 5, rum, Havana Club, Cuban version. 4.1 million cases in 2020. That was like, the last measure, so it's taking like some of the 2019 numbers pre-pandemic, but we can go from there. Here's the outlier no one got, much less myself. McDowell's from India moves 8.1 million cases. So think about it. Number 4 is double what number 5 is. 8.1 million cases of McDowell's Indian rum. And listen, there's a lot to be said when you have 1 billion people in your country, so or 700 million, 1 billion. What difference does it make now? Number 3, raise a leg. It's Captain Morgan. Captain Morgan has 11.9 million cases. I'm shocked, but we do like that spiced rum. That's for sure. And then here we go, number 2 in the world. You know, if Kevin's watching, this one's for you, Kevin. Bacardi is number 2 in the world with 17.7 million cases sold. So Bacardi's number 2. Who's number 1? All right, here we go. For all the people that guessed in the chat. So I hope you guys are watching on YouTube or on the Frankie Dranks page on Facebook, because I know there's a little confusion. Some people jumping on Leaf and Dram, some people jumping on my personal. So I'm gonna fix that this week. We're just going to YouTube and we're going to Frankie Dranks. So I hope you guys all got in the chat. Thank you guys for following me on Sticks and Sips Forever. You guys are awesome. Number 1 brand in the world with 23.9 million cases sold. Tanduay from the Philippines. So massive brand, probably the biggest brand you never heard of. Not really huge in the United States, but they are massive in Asia. And one of the coolest brands that I've ever gotten the opportunity to get to know, because it's just a machine. It's just a machine. So listen, been on talking about the classes of rums here I'm at Finca. Got some quiet here, get to talk to you guys. I've been rambling on for over like 30 minutes, and what I'm gonna do next is I'm actually gonna show you a couple of rum cocktails that these guys do. I'm gonna throw them onto the podcast right now. So for now, I'm gonna sign off and say, man, you guys have been incredible. Thank you so much, and tune in next week. We got some really cool stuff for you. So thanks again for tuning in to Leaf and Dram, and we may have some big news coming up in a week or two. So stay tuned. All right, cheers, everybody.